Hi there, my name is Jason Caldwell. I'm the lead developer here at s2Member, and this is a tutorial video to cover the advanced topic of s2Member's file download options. This is a completely optional aspect of s2Member. If you're not planning to protect files with s2Member, then you really could skip over this completely. But if you are planning to protect things like zip files, PDFs, perhaps you have external HTML and other media files that are not actually a part of WordPress that you'd like to protect, even if those files should be served right in a browser and not necessarily as a quote-unquote file download, file download restrictions are a great way to do that. And I'm going to show you here later in this video how you can accomplish inline file protection as well. Now, there's a strong distinction in s2Member about what is content and what is a file. Content, examples of content would be posts or pages or tags or categories. This is content within WordPress, the typical types of content, or even if you have custom post types that are installed by another theme or plugin, that's all content within WordPress. A file would be anything that's pretty much not content. I mean, that's a file download. One of the things you'll notice about s2Member is that we intentionally do not integrate with the media library for WordPress. And that is so that s2Member has a lot more flexibility in terms of the way it regulates access and grants permissions to files that have been protected. And it also makes it possible for s2Member to integrate with things like Amazon S3 and Cloudfront. So as you get started with s2Member's file download options, you'll need to become familiar with this security-enabled directory, the plugins/s2Member files directory. That's a security-enabled directory that s2Member automatically creates upon activation of the plugin. So let's take a quick look. I'm going to open up another window here where I have my s2Member files directory. And just for the sake of clarity, I'm going to back up a bit here. Let's pretend this is your installation of WordPress. You'll always have a WP content folder. Then you'll have plugins. And with s2Member installed, you will have at least these three directories. s2Member is the plugin directory. And then s2Member will create these two additional directories on activation of the plugin. Inside your s2Member files directory, when you first install s2Member, you will have one file here, and that will be the Htaccess file, which denies public access to these files. So this is a security-enabled directory, and you can upload files to this directory, perhaps through applications like FileZilla, through FTP, and you can even organize files in this directory into subfolders if you like. So as long as the files are located somewhere inside this security-enabled directory, it's fine. You can organize them and nest them into different types of folders in any way that you prefer. In this example, I've uploaded a file called examplefile.zip. And please ignore these other files in the first portion of this video because these are going to be covered later in this series. Right now, we just want to focus on this one file that I've uploaded to test the functionality of s2Member's file downloads. Alright, let's go back to our dashboard. Now that we've uploaded a file to the security-enabled directory, now we need to find out how to link to that file so that a member could download that protected file. And there's an example in your dashboard. You will have an example line here that contains the URL that's required on your installation. And really, it just starts with the root URL that leads to your installation of WordPress, followed by a query string stating that the s2Member file download equals, and here you just provide the name of that file as it exists in the s2Member files directory. Now this is the file name relative to its location inside this directory, so if you did nest your files into subfolders, you would want to include the relative path to that file. So for example, if I had this inside a subdirectory, I would write s2Member file download equals that subdirectory name /examplefile.zip. Okay, so that's the basics of s2Member's file download protections. And that's really all that's needed to get started with s2Member's file downloads. Let's go ahead and take this link. I'm going to copy it. We'll open up a new window here. And let's go to this URL. Now I'm logged into the site, so I will have access to that file. So s2Member prompts me to download the file. Now I already have that file, so Windows will place that little 1 there. But this is the file download, and all I do is save it to my computer. And so a customer would get this prompt, save the file, and now they have it. So that works beautifully. Now, if you tried that in your installation when you first install s2Member, you might get a message that says file downloads are not yet enabled by the site owner. And the reason you might get that message is because right down here in the basic download restrictions section, you'll first need to configure and enable s2Member's download options. And the way you do that is by specifying at least one basic restriction. And so I'm going to go over this little section right now so that you have a good understanding about how this functions. By default, these are not filled in at all. And s2Member's file download options are completely disabled so that if you're not using this functionality, we don't even open that up as a possibility on your site. But if you do want file downloads, you'll need to configure at least one of these. So here I've stated that if you're a level 0 free subscriber or higher, then I'm going to limit you to 25 downloads, 25 unique file downloads, so 25 different files, every 30 days. Now this applies to level 0 or higher. That's how all download and protection restrictions in s2Member work. It's incremental access based on the level number. So if you're a level 1 member, you would be subjected to this same 25 file limit every 30 days. Now if you wanted to say, okay, if you're level 1 or higher, I'll allow you to download 50 files every 30 days, then you can do that. So now, if you're level 0, you're at a 25 file limit every 30 days. If you're at level 1 or higher, then you get 50 files every 30 days. And this would cover level 1 or higher. So level 2, 3, and 4 would also be at a 50 file limit. If you wanted to have each level at a different limit, then you can certainly do that by just entering these fields. Specifying some additional restriction options here. If you wanted to prevent level 0 free subscribers from downloading files at all, then you could leave these fields blank. And so now file download access requires level 1 or higher. If a level 0 free subscriber were to attempt to click this link to download a protected file on your site, they would instead be redirected to the membership options page. If you required level 2 or higher, and a level 1 member tried to click this link, they would also be redirected to the membership options page, where they would need to upgrade their account to at least level 2 or higher so that they could gain access to this file. Okay, so that's s2Member's basic download restrictions. This is all that's required to get going with s2Member and facilitate file downloads to members. The basic download restrictions is all that's required. There's a lot of other functionality here, and we'll get to this in the next portion of this video. Okay, we're coming back here, and I'm going to explain a little bit more about this basic download restrictions panel in this portion of the video, because I do want to cover everything, and this additional section here goes over some other basic functionalities that a lot of site owners would want to employ, even if they weren't using some of the advanced functionality that we'll cover later. Some of these additional options here are what I would also consider to be part of the basics. All right, one of the things you'll notice is that if you actually place a link on your site where you create an anchor tag and this becomes an actual link inside of a post or a page, if you go to your website and you click that link, you will get a JavaScript prompt with a little alert that indicates to you how many files you've downloaded in the current period, and lets you know that if you proceed with the download, then it's going to count against you as a member. And it's a very intuitive prompt, and it will give the member a chance to see that, okay, hey, this is going to count against me. Do I really want to download this file? Now you can, as the site owner, disable that type of functionality. So if you don't like that, or you want to implement something more custom, then by all means you can certainly do that. And the way you accomplish that, you can read through the details about this here, is by just appending and s2Member skip confirmation. So you would have this link, and then you would append and s2Member skip confirmation onto the end of it, and then upon clicking that link, that confirmation prompt would not occur at all. Okay, so just a little tip there. Also, it's important to note that there's a difference between a file download, where you get the prompt like you saw in the first portion of this video, and a file that would actually be loaded right up in the browser, where you wouldn't need to get a prompt. The file would just load. If it's something that could load in a browser, it would load in the browser. So some examples of that might be PDF files. A lot of browsers, a lot of your customers might have the Adobe PDF extension installed in their browser, so that if they click the PDF link, it would open right there for them to view. Other examples would be audio and video files. There's some common extensions here that are listed as inline files. Okay, and what you can do, there's two ways to deal with inline files. By default, s2Member will always issue a file download prompt regardless of what type of file it is. Okay, but you can, as the site owner, I'm going to close this down for just a moment. You can come right here to inline file extensions and provide all of the extensions. So here's some common ones. You might just copy that line and paste it right into this field. So if the file that's being downloaded is actually a file that's of one of these extensions that you've specified, that should be served in line, okay, then if it matches one of these extensions, then instead of issuing a file download prompt, s2Member will simply try to display the file in the browser. Okay, so this is how that's handled. Another way to handle it is just by placing this into the URL. So you don't actually have to use this field if you don't want to. This would be a global configuration. Or you could do it on a per download basis or per file basis by just appending and s2Member file inline equals yes. So you might have a URL that would include some additional variables here. s2Member file download equals example file.zip, and s2Member skip confirmation, and s2Member file inline equals yes or no. Okay, so that gives you some control over even what I would consider to be basics about file downloads. So just to touch on that. All right, in the next segment, we'll pick back up and we'll go over, I'm going to cover the shortcode here, and I'm also going to cover advanced mod rewrite linkage in the very next segment. Okay, so now I'm going to cover two alternative ways to link to files. And I also want to just make a point that if you're planning to use any of s2Member's more advanced file download restrictions, then one of the first things you'll want to do is learn more about this shortcode and also about advanced mod rewrite linkage, which are the two alternatives I'm going to cover in this segment of the video. Because if you're going to do anything more advanced, then these two alternative ways to link to files are going to be worth your while taking the time to sit down and just look through the documentation and see how these are used, because you're going to have a little bit more flexibility, particularly with the shortcode. All right, the shortcode here is an alternative. It's going to produce, if I was to take this and copy it and paste it into a post or a page or into a text widget, it's going to output a link exactly like you see here, because I've given it the same parameters. Here I'm saying s2Member file download equals example file.zip, and here I'm saying the exact same thing, just with a different methodology. Here I'm saying s2 file download equals the name of the file. It's the same thing. But this shortcode will not only support things like whether the file is going to be served inline or not, it also supports download keys and some other more advanced aspects of s2Member, and I'm going to show you how you can learn more about that. I'm going to close this panel down, come right down here to Shortcode Attributes and API Functions, and here you will see that the s2 file shortcode has a lot of attributes here that have been well documented and give you a lot of flexibility to cover more advanced things that you might need to accomplish. So learning how to use the s2 file shortcode might be a good idea, particularly if you are planning to do something in the future more advanced with this type of integration offered by s2Member. If you're a PHP developer, you will find a PHP API function here, which allows you to generate links to protected files through PHP alone. And this is documented much like you see here in the codex at s2Member. You just click this link and it'll open that up for you. All right. The other alternative is advanced mod rewrite linkage. And this is called advanced, but I actually have many site owners that tell me that this is what they would consider to be the simplest way. And that is because the rewrite linkage is allowing you to link directly to the file as it exists on your server. So you link to WP content plugins. You would start this out with a URL to your installation of WordPress, and WP content plugins, s2Member files, and the name of the file. So you could link literally directly to the file. And s2Member's Htaccess mod rewrite rules, which are located, I'm going to switch screens for a moment, they're located in this Htaccess file. They're designed to make it possible so that when you do link directly to a file, s2Member is going to internally on your web server rewrite that link on the server side, which is completely invisible to a browser. It's going to rewrite that link internally to a format more like this. Okay, so for some site owners this is simpler, because instead of dealing with query string variables or a shortcode, they could just link directly to the file. It's just easier for them to understand. And by all means, you're welcome to use this. In fact, there are some additional things here that you can read through on how to accomplish similar functionality. So, for example, if you're going to do s2Member file inline equals yes, and then the standard linking method, you can accomplish the same thing through a direct link by just including this little tag in your link to the file. So you'll find that documented here. Okay, so those are the two alternative methods for linking. If you're going to be using s2Member's file download functionality in conjunction with something like JW Player or Flow Player or another media playback device, I would strongly suggest that you avoid using URLs that contain a query string in those cases. When you're integrating with a media playback device or another third-party application, linking directly to the file, taking advantage of s2Member's mod rewrite functionality can help you there, because some of those media playback devices will choke on URLs that contain things like an equal sign or an and or an ampersand. So in those cases, just use the direct link to the file. You can avoid some problems. And I will cover that whenever I go over the JW Player examples here in a later portion of this video. Okay, next up we're going to go over advanced download restrictions, which talks about download keys. And we're also going to cover the topic of restricting files or restricting access to a particular file at a particular membership level or at a particular custom capability. I'll show you how to accomplish that. Okay, we'll follow up with that in the very next segment. Okay, so far we've been talking for the most part about basic download restrictions. And that is to say that basic download restrictions provide access to all files in the s2Member files directory, regardless of where they're located, and the only restrictions employed are those which you configure here, where you're specifying the number of files that can be downloaded every X number of days at certain membership levels. So a question you've probably been asking yourself is, what happens if I want to take a specific file and make sure that not only does it meet, does a user or a member in my site meet these basic download restrictions, but I also want to make sure that a particular file can only be downloaded by someone, for example, at level 1 or higher. Okay, so I'm going to show you just quickly how to accomplish that. That is actually considered part of the custom capability and member level file functionality provided by s2Member. And that is located, the documentation for that is located under the API scripting section of your dashboard. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to that screen and come right down here to custom capability and member level files. And here you will find the documentation on how to accomplish this. And I'm just showing you where this is here for future reference, but I'm just going to show you quickly how simple this actually is. So I'm going to switch screens for a moment. Here is how I can ensure that a file in the s2Member files directory is only accessible to a user or a member that has access to a particular level. I'm going to create a special subdirectory, which is documented by s2Member in that panel I was just referring to, called Htaccess s2Member level 1. That is a special subdirectory name that you can create optionally inside of the s2Member files folder. Now I can take this example file.zip and move it into this directory. Okay, that file now requires not only for the basic download restrictions that you've configured to be satisfied, but it also requires now that the user or member that is downloading the file or is attempting to download the file, they must have access to level 1 or higher in order for the download to succeed, just because the file is inside that special subdirectory. So that's very simple. Okay, now coming back, I'm going to bring back up to the API scripting section here, where it goes over custom capability and member level files. It's also possible to do a very similar thing through custom capabilities, where you use Htaccess s2Member CCAP and then the name of your custom capability. If you're not familiar with custom capabilities, you can read over that portion of the documentation right above this section. Farther down here is where we document the way you create these special level directories, subdirectories, and that's what I just did. And you'll see examples here of how you would then link to the file. You know, just like all files that are nested into subdirectories, you just include the name of the subdirectory / the name of the file. So here we have s2Member file download equals Htaccess s2Member level, whatever level you're protecting it at, and then the name of the file. Okay, so someone clicking one of these links would not only have to meet the basic download restriction options that you have configured for s2Member in terms of how many downloads are allowed in any given period, but they would also need to satisfy the permissions that are required by that special subfolder that you created, Htaccess s2Member level 1 in this case. So a member here would need to have level 1 access or better. If they were at level 2 or 3 or 4, they could also access files in this directory, because again, membership levels work incrementally. Okay, now I also want to cover advanced download restrictions, which has to do with download keys. This is advanced because this puts the ball completely in your court. Okay, generating an advanced file download key, a link to a file that includes a download key, which there's 3 different ways to accomplish that here. Generating a link with a download key will completely bypass all of your download restrictions. And it will also bypass any special subfolders that a file is located within. So the generation of a file download key, which is documented here in the Advanced Download Restrictions section, is something to be very leery of. You need to be very careful about creating links that include keys in them, because if you introduce a link that includes a key, you're providing access to that file. It won't matter whether the user or member is logged into your site. It does not matter. It doesn't matter whether they have an account at all. Generating a link to a protected file that includes a key provides access to the file to anyone, even in the public. Okay, so you'll find the documentation on that here, and this is mostly for developers or for advanced site owners who want to do some more creative things where they might want to present links to certain people at certain times on their website, and they might be integrating this type of functionality into another area that already encompasses some form of access restriction where they don't need to be concerned about these basic download restrictions and things like that. So this, again, puts the ball completely in your court. And this is another great reason to get familiar with the s2Member shortcode, because out of the 3 examples given here, the shortcode is by far the easiest way to generate a link that includes a key. Okay, next up, I'm going to go over remote authorization and give you some examples of how to create a podcast that would be protected, would incorporate audio files that would be protected through your podcast. Okay, let's talk some about remote header authorization as it pertains to s2Member's file download options. This is grouped together with podcasting because it's one of the most typical uses of remote header authorization. Remote header authorization, though, can be used independently of any podcasting because it's a technology all of its own. So first I'm going to explain what it is, and then I'll show you in the second segment of this video, of this particular video, I will show you how to actually create a podcast using this technique. So remote header authorization is pretty much exactly what it states. It's a way for a customer, a user, or a member of your site to be authorized for access to a file through their username and password, but without actually coming to your website. Okay? It's actually, you could even access a file with your username and password from within an external application, even from a remote location, maybe not even in a web browser, as long as you're within a software application that supports remote header authorization. And iTunes is one example of that. It supports remote header authorization. Many applications do. In fact, it's one of the oldest forms of security protection on the internet. So here's how you enable it, and then rather than just continue to describe it, I'm just going to show you. This is how you enable it. You just take this and put this on the end of any link that you generate to a file. And s2Member file remote equals yes. That enables s2Member's remote header authorization. All right, so for example, if I come back up here to that example link in the basic download options or restrictions section, you'll see that I have the link and it's s2Member file download equals example file.zip. And then I would have and s2Member file remote equals yes, just like you see right here in the example. Another way to accomplish it even easier, and this is another reason why I recommend learning how to use the shortcode, is here we just specify remote equals yes, and this is just easier, it's shorter. So let's go ahead and take this. I'm going to copy it, and I've already prepared a page where we can test this. Let's edit this test page. And here you can see I have that same shortcode, and I've created a clickable link using this shortcode. Okay, so the shortcode is actually the hyperlink reference value. Okay, and I'm going to log out of the site now. And let's go back to that page, the test page that has that link on it. Okay, I'm not logged into the site any longer, and this is a protected file. So normally, when you would click a link to a protected file on your site, s2Member is going to realize, okay, this person does not have access to the file, they're not logged in, it's a protected file, and so because they don't have access, s2Member would redirect you to whichever page on your site you have designated as the membership options page, so that the customer could learn about becoming a member and log in and get access to what they were trying to download. But this is going to behave a little differently when I click this link. Okay, remote header authorization is enabled. Okay, what happens in a web browser is that a web browser will detect that a header authorization is being requested. And so you will get a box very much like this one where it's asking you to enter a username and password. And if you pass authorization here, if they enter the username and password that they have for your website, then they log in, the file download will immediately proceed. Okay? So this is a way, and just to describe here to you how this works, if I don't authorize myself, then I'm denied, just the generic error. I could also take this link, this is why we refer to it as remote. I could take this link address, and let me just close down this website altogether, open up a new tab, and I'll just paste this right into my address bar. Okay, so now I'm not on that test site at all anymore. Okay, and I just go to this URL. Okay, now I'm getting that same remote header authorization box. Okay, so this is allowing me to log in to your website without actually being on your website. And if I succeed, I get to download the file. The file's been downloaded, and I've never even been to your website. Okay, I just used the link that allowed me to download a file from your website. It required authorization. I entered my username and password, and I was able to download the file. So that can be very useful in certain circumstances. In the case of podcasting, which we'll discuss next, in the case of podcasting, it can be useful because in an application like iTunes, for example, the customer is not on your website. They're in a separate software application where they still need to have a username and password to access your podcast, but they'll need a way to authorize themselves to so that you can grant them access to the files without needing to have them come to your website, log in, gain access. And in fact, in an application like iTunes, that would not even be possible. So this is where remote header authorization can be a real nice feature to have. Okay, so we'll pick back up in the next segment of this video, and I'll actually walk you through the creation of a podcast. Okay, here we are at apple.com. I've pulled up some information and the specs on how to create podcasts for iTunes. I'm going to assume in this video that you already are familiar somewhat with iTunes, the application, and that you've already done some research of your own on how to generate a podcast that's compatible with iTunes. But if you haven't, you can go to this URL, or you can just search in Google for how to test your feed. That's going to facilitate the podcast through the iTunes application. So that's where I'm at now. And we can see here it says once you've created your RSS feed and posted it to a server with a publicly addressable URL, you should test your feed to see if it works with iTunes. You can launch iTunes. In the advanced menu, select subscribe to podcast and enter your feed URL in the box and click OK. Okay, so we'll assume that you've gotten that far and you've read through some of this information about the basics of interfacing to iTunes. All right, in this video, I'm going to walk you through the specifics that are required to get this to work with protected audio content with s2Member. And I'll start by bringing you right here to my FTP application, where I'm at a live website so that we can test the actual feed that I'm going to create in this video. This is jason.websharksinc.net, and I'm going to come right in here to this installation. I'm going to show you, here's my WP content directory, and we'll go into my plugin subdirectory, and I want to go into the s2Member files secured folder. We can see that I have an itunes.xml file, that is my feed, and then I have one testaudio.mp3 file. Okay, so the important points to note here are that your feed, your XML file, and the audio file both need to be protected by s2Member. The reason for that, the reason that your feed should not be publicly accessible is that in order to protect and authenticate access to the enclosures that are going to be incorporated in this XML file, we first need to have the iTunes authenticate your users or your members to receive the feed itself. That way, future authentication to the MP3 files that occur within iTunes, the iTunes software application, will succeed. So, key here, itunes.xml, or whatever the name of your XML file is, along with all of your enclosures, should all go inside the s2Member files directory. Now, of course, you may want to create subdirectories and organize this in different ways, and you're more than able to do that. In this example, I'm just keeping it simple. Okay, let's take a quick look now. I'm going to bring up another window. Let's take a look at itunes.xml. Okay, I'm going to assume again that you know how to create an XML feed for iTunes. This is a basic structure, and you can find the information on how to formulate this XML file at apple.com. So here's just the basic details up here at the top. And then this is the point, this is the important part that we want to focus on here, is this item. I only have one item in my feed in this example. So for clarity, I pulled this item out, and this is the file that you'll need. You'll need all of this in your podcast. But I'm just going to take this out and separate it, this item that goes into the feed, because you might actually have in your feed, you might have multiple items where you have numerous audio files that are distributed with your podcast, all protected by s2Member. But we're just going to focus on one here so that I can walk you through how this is accomplished. Okay, if you remember, I have that audio.mp3 file loaded into my s2Member files directory. So whenever I do an enclosure in my podcast feed, I want the URL to that enclosure to lead to a remote authorization file. So I have remote file equals yes. And then I use an ampersand instead of just the and sign, okay, because this needs to be, you need to have entities encoded here because you're inside of an XML. This is how you handle entities. So instead of just the and sign like this, you need to have the HTML entity for the ampersand. Okay, so we have s2Member file remote equals yes, s2Member file inline equals yes. That way the audio file is delivered inline. We don't want a download prompt. We can't even accomplish that within iTunes. So we want the file served inline. And then we just specify s2Member file download equals the name of the audio file. Now one thing to be careful of, you'll notice here that I have the s2Member file download equals audio.mp3 on the end of this link. You'll want to be sure that you do that also, because iTunes will want to see that mp3 extension on the end. So you shouldn't have s2Member file inline equals yes on the end. You should have the name of the file with a valid audio extension on the end of your link. Okay, so that's how you would create the URL to that protected file enclosure. Now, let's take a look at how you would actually link in iTunes to your feed itself, to the itunes.xml file. Okay, so remember, itunes.xml contains the entire XML feed, including this test item that we were just looking at. So now I want to link to this feed so that I can instruct my users, members, on how to subscribe to my podcast. And there's actually multiple ways to accomplish this, but I'm just going to show you using the test techniques that are described on the iTunes website. Here is the standard linking method, where we have the root domain, the root path, or I should say the root URL leading to my installation of WordPress. Then I have s2Member file remote equals yes, and s2Member file inline equals yes, and s2Member file download equals my podcast, which is itunes.xml in this example. So this is one way to distribute a link to your podcast. Now here's an additional way. This one allows you to use the advanced mod rewrite linkage where you don't have any query string variables. This would be a direct link where you just link directly to json.websharksinc.net. Here I have WP content plugins, s2Member files. Then I specify s2Member file remote, s2Member file inline, and then the name of my podcast feed. Okay, so let's just take the standard linking method. I'm going to copy this. This is what I might distribute. And let's open up iTunes. Here at the top, I follow the instructions provided by apple.com. I go to Advanced, Subscribe to Podcast, and I type in, or I can paste in the URL leading to my podcast feed and press OK. Now, if you notice, if you remember from one of the previous segments of this video, that whenever we use remote authorization in a browser, we got a similar prompt here to enter a username and password. This is where remote header authorization in your links that you enclose with your feed come into play. Here, the customer will need to enter the username and password that they have for your website. So I'll just enter my username and password to test this out. And now iTunes is downloading the items from that podcast. And I only have one, it's just a test. And there it is. That's the iTunes icon that I specified in my feed. And I can click here and it will play the items that are in my feed. Okay, so that's how you create a podcast with iTunes. and using s2Member to safeguard the content so that subscribers to your podcast are required to have a username and password on your website. Okay, quickly, I just wanted to touch on this little section that's new in recent versions of s2Member. It's entitled Preventing Gzip Conflicts as they relate to s2Member's file downloads. Now, if you've just installed s2Member, this will already be in your Htaccess file. These are the mod rewrite rules that s2Member needs to have in the root Htaccess file for WordPress. Or if you've recently upgraded, then you'll already have this, because again, s2Member takes care of this automatically for you. Alright, what is Gzip compression? It's a way for your server to compress files before they're delivered to the browser, which helps to speed up the user-facing side of your website. However, PHP scripts, whenever they output files, which is the case with s2Member, then those files are already going to be compressed, and so we don't want to have Gzip compression enabled at that time during that specific event. So s2Member makes a valiant attempt, to accomplish the disabling of Gzip during its delivery of a file. It tries to do that through PHP, but there are times, depending on your server, where we will need this rewrite rule to be in existence in your Htaccess file. So I just want to show you quickly. I'm going to open up another window here. This is the file I'm referring to. Right here, Htaccess. If you have, it'll be in the root of your WordPress installation. And I'm going to open it up and just show you. Here you will see that you have the typical rewrite rules for WordPress, and s2Member has inserted its rewrite rule just above that. This rule should go somewhere above the mod rewrite rules for WordPress. If you have other rewrite rules, then just try to position this right above the one for WordPress. That's what s2Member is going to do automatically. And this is not going to conflict with any of the mod rewrite rules for WordPress. And if you look here, there's not any actual rewrites taking place. All we're doing here is checking to see if the query string contains an s2Member file download request. And in that specific case, we want to set this environment variable to no Gzip to set it to true so that Gzip is disabled automatically at the server level. Okay, so that's it, just to be aware of that. Okay, thank you very much. Alright, in this portion of the video I'm going to cover Amazon S3 as a CDN storage option. By default, s2Member is going to look for all of your protected files inside the security-enabled directory that's local to your installation of WordPress. WP content, plugins, s2Member files is normally where all protected files would go. And so when you generate links with s2Member to a protected file, that's where s2Member is going to look for that file is in this directory. But you can change that. If you'd like to instead use an Amazon S3 bucket, you can certainly do that. And s2Member is pre-integrated with Amazon Web Services. I'll assume in this video that you've already become familiar with Amazon Web Services and that you already have an Amazon S3 account. So I'm going to skip over all of these details here. I'm going to go right down into creating my bucket, and I'm going to show you how to configure this. Okay, the first thing we need to do is establish a name for our bucket. And we actually do that at Amazon.com. I'm going to flip tabs here over to my S3 Management Console at Amazon. I'm at the S3 tab. And we just need to create a bucket. Now it's a good idea to make sure that your bucket is unique to your installation. So please do create a new bucket specifically for s2Member to use. It's a replacement for the normal s2Member files directory that normally would be local to your WordPress installation. Now we're going to change that, and s2Member is instead going to look for protected files inside whatever bucket name you choose here. It's important to be careful about how you name your bucket. Amazon has some strict policies in regards to how or what characters can appear in the name of a bucket, and a good practice to get into is just to stick to all alphanumerics and dashes. You want this to be compatible with a host name, because ultimately you might decide to use this as part of a host name. So we want to make sure it remains lowercase, all alphanumerics. And the region you can just leave as US standard, or if you like a different one, you can choose that here. And we create the bucket. So that's it. The bucket now exists. It doesn't have anything in it yet, but that's okay. I'm going to flip tabs again now and go back to my dashboard and give s2Member the name of the bucket that I created. Okay. Now I need to acquire my Amazon access key, my access key ID. There's instructions here on where to find that. I'm going to go ahead and follow along. We're going to go right here to this little drop-down menu in the right-hand corner of your management console. And when you drop this down, you'll see there's an option for security credentials. I'm going to flip tabs here where I've already come to that section of my Amazon account. And you'll see here is my access key ID. I just want to copy that. And let's go back over to my dashboard. And I'll paste that into the key field. Okay, now I just need my Amazon secret key, my secret access key. So I'll go back over to my security credentials, and you'll see that there is where your secret access key is. Now I'm not going to show you my secret access key. I've already pasted that in, but you can click here and get your secret access key, and then we'll come right back to our dashboard where I've already input that value. Okay, so all I do now is just come back down to the bottom and save changes. And that's it. Now, s2Member, any file download links that you create, just like normal, nothing changes in the way you link to files. Everything is the same. All of the shortcodes, everything that works is the same. The only difference is that now, instead of s2Member looking in this directory locally, it's going to be looking here in your Amazon bucket. So you will need to upload files to your bucket instead of to your site in the s2Member files directory. Okay, in the next segment, we're going to cover Amazon Cloudfront integration as an additional option. Okay, now let's take a look at Amazon S3 with the Cloudfront combination working as a true content delivery network. Okay, now I just want to make the point here in this video that if you just want to use your Amazon S3 bucket as a storage option instead of using the local s2Member files directory, then you can certainly do that. You can skip the Cloudfront section. Just configure your Amazon S3 bucket and you're done. But if you do want to further enhance the speed at which your files are delivered to users and members, then you can integrate Cloudfront. Cloudfront is a content delivery network, and along with being able to speed up the delivery of the files that you're making available to your users and members, it's also going to make it possible for you to do real-time streaming through the Rtmp protocol, which I will cover in the next segment of this video. Okay, so if you decide that Cloudfront is right for you, we just drop this down. You need to already have your Amazon S3 bucket integration completed. Then we come to the Cloudfront section, and I'm just going to skip down through these details and go right into what we need to accomplish here. The first thing we need here is our Amazon Cloudfront key pair ID. Okay, so I'm going to flip tabs over to my web services account at Amazon, and I'll assume in this video that you already have an Amazon Web Services account with access to Cloudfront. Okay, and all we're going to do here is create a new key pair ID. Now, if you already have a key pair ID, you can certainly use that one. But I'm going to create a new one here just so I can walk you through the process. What's going to happen here when I click this link to create a new key pair is I'm going to get a prompt to download a file. And that's an important file. You need to keep that file because you're going to need it to integrate with s2Member. Okay, so there's the file. It's going to start with PK, private key, followed by your key pair ID, and then it'll have a PEM extension. Okay, now I downloaded a file a while ago, so I'm going to just save this in a different directory. Create a new folder here. We'll call it Cloudfront because that's important. I want to make sure that I have access to that file. I don't want to lose that file. In fact, it's a good idea to hang on to this, perhaps archive it somewhere on your computer. Okay, whenever I close this window now, this window behind here is going to refresh, and it's going to show me the new key that I just generated. Okay, and there it is. So this is the key pair ID that I need right now. I'm going to go ahead and copy that. I'm going to come back over to my dashboard. I'm going to give that key pair ID to s2Member. Okay, now s2Member needs the Amazon Cloudfront private key, the contents of your pk-... .pem file. That is the file that we just were prompted to download at Amazon. Okay, so I'm going to open up my text editor here. Close this down, and let's open up that file that we were just looking at. I put it in the Cloudfront folder, and we're going to open that file in just a text editor. Okay, and we want to make sure that we grab the entire contents of this file. Don't lose one of these dashes. Don't grab just what's in the middle. Okay, you need all of it. Let's copy that, come back to our dashboard, and we'll paste that into this field. When it first goes in, it'll be in plain text, and as you click off of this field, it'll convert to just bullets so that it's not visible to anyone that happens to see your website while you're working on it. Okay, and then down below here we want to auto-configure the Amazon S3 Cloudfront combination. So we want to make sure that this box is checked. Now this additional box you can just leave unchecked unless you plan on setting up CNAMEs, which is an even more advanced feature that I'm not going to cover in this brief tutorial. But if you do want to go over this, you can certainly set up CNAMEs as well for the two distributions that s2Member is going to generate. s2Member will generate one distribution for normal file downloads, a Cloudfront distribution, and it's going to generate a second distribution for streaming file downloads. Now, it's really, from a user's perspective, none of that really matters. S3 and s2Member are going to handle all of this automatically for you. Just check this box, and we're going to configure everything, including creating the distribution, setting permissions. It's all handled automatically by s2Member here. So I'm going to come down to the bottom and press Save Changes, and this may take a moment to work. Okay, it says Options Saved. Amazon Cloudfront distributions have been auto-configured successfully. And it says, please allow 30 minutes for propagation. Okay, now I just want to show you quickly. We'll need to wait now 30 minutes. What's going to happen now is whenever someone tries to access a link, and by the way you link to files does not change. Everything remains the same. The only difference is where files are being pulled from and where files ultimately are being downloaded from. But the way that you link to files does not change. All of these shortcodes, the standard linking format, all the same. Now there are some additional details that you can go over down here in this Cloudfront section, and there's some little notes down here over some things that you might want to be aware of. So I would advise reading down through these sections. But otherwise, everything remains the same. Now we'll need to wait 30 minutes for those distributions to propagate, and I'm going to switch tabs here for just a moment over to my management console, and I'm going to flip over to my Cloudfront distribution panel. And you'll see here that s2Member has generated two distributions that are still in progress. One of those is for normal file downloads, and another one is for streaming file downloads. The streaming distribution is just there in case you decide to use the Rtmp protocol through JW Player, which I'll cover in the next segment of this video. So you can come here and watch your Cloudfront distributions. Whenever this goes to enabled, or it leaves the in progress state, then you'll be ready to go. Now it's important to note that Amazon Cloudfront is connected to your bucket name. So if you watched me in the previous video, we created a bucket called WS s2Member Files. So nothing changes in terms of where my files are stored. I still upload files to my Amazon S3 bucket. My distributions through Cloudfront are powered by the files inside this bucket that I've created. And if you check your bucket after enabling the Cloudfront distributions, you'll notice that s2Member automatically creates a cross-domain.xml file inside your bucket. This is important to keep in there just in case you do enable the real-time streaming in the future. This will be something that you'll want to have in there. And you can look up cross-domain.xml on the internet if you'd like to learn more about what this file does. Okay, so let's switch back over to our dashboard here. And in the next segment of this video, I'm going to walk you through what's now possible through JW Player from Longtail Video now that you have the Cloudfront CDN integrated. Okay, now we're going to discuss the JW Player and the Rtmp protocol, which becomes possible once you have Amazon S3 and s2Member integrated with Cloudfront as well. Okay, Rtmp Streaming is a very popular option among membership sites where the audio and video content that you would like to serve to paying users or paying members, you want to make sure that as those files are delivered to paying customers, that the paying customers cannot then download the file itself and then perhaps redistribute it. So the Rtmp protocol makes that possible. where you're actually doing streaming of the video in the truest sense. It also allows JW Player and other media devices to actually do a true seek within the file, where you're able to seek to different areas of a file without having to load the entire MP4 file. So this can be very useful. It's also an extremely advanced aspect of s2Member's integration with Cloudfront. So please try to keep that in mind as I work through this, because this can get very complex, especially for novice site owners. All right, the first option here on the top is a way to accomplish JW Player video display without having Amazon and Cloudfront. This is not as powerful, and so I'm going to bypass this in this tutorial, but you're more than welcome to take a look at this. If you don't want to integrate Amazon S3 Cloudfront, you're not that concerned about having true streaming, then this would certainly be an option. The next one down is the one I will focus on in this video, because this is true Rtmp streaming of an MP4 file through the Amazon and Cloudfront integration. And these two additional code samples beneath here, these might be good for developers to take a look at. You might find some ideas here. These are a couple of alternative ways to integrate this. All right, let's go and get started here with this example. The first thing you'll see is that we need to download JW Player. Okay, and I've already opened this up in a new window. You'll come to Longtail Video and you'll download JW Player. In this case, I just entered a fake email address so I could download a quick copy. Be sure to read through their licensing agreement. Once you download the file, you'll get a zip file, and you can unzip that. And I'm going to open up a separate window here where I've already extracted those files and placed them into the proper location for this video tutorial. What I'd like you to do to follow along with this tutorial is go to the root of your WordPress installation, where you should have these three directories already, and create a new directory called JW Player, all lowercase, one word. And inside that directory, you place all of the files that you got from JW Player. The most important ones here are jwplayer.js, that's the JavaScript file, and then the Flash player. Okay, these other files are really unimportant for right now. Okay, let's go ahead and go back to our browser and take another look at this code sample. You can see in this code sample that this is quite complex. It's not a lengthy code sample, but it does use both HTML, PHP, and even some JavaScript provided by JW Player. So before we could actually use this in a post or a page, we're going to need a couple of additional plugins to make sure that this doesn't completely get mangled by WordPress. Because WordPress does not really jive with raw code like this, and particularly it's not going to work by default with PHP at all. Now, it would be my recommendation to put a code sample like this one, to actually do this in a theme file, or perhaps in a custom plugin that you're writing. Okay, but you can do it right into a post or a page if you choose. So I'll show you in this video how that's accomplished. Okay, there's two prerequisites in terms of what additional plugins that you're going to need. The first one, I'll switch tabs over here to the raw HTML plugin. You'll need to have this plugin installed so that as you place raw HTML into your editor for WordPress, it won't completely get mangled by the visual editor or by the content filters associated with WordPress. So this is first, and then also be sure that you have the exec.php plugin installed so that the PHP tags that we'll be using in this tutorial can be parsed by your installation of WordPress. And I'll switch tabs again here just so you can see, here's the installation that I'm working with, and you can see I have those two additional plugins installed. Alright, let's go ahead and grab this code sample now. I'm going to copy this in its entirety. Okay, all the way from the div, all the way down to the ending PHP tag. I'll copy that, and I've actually already created a test page that has this exact code sample. Okay, now one important thing to note here is that in this particular code sample, everything is pre-configured with the exception of one thing, and that is the video file name itself. So in this case, I'm going to be trying to test play this little test video that I got from Longtail. Okay, so I'm going to switch tabs again just for one moment here and show you. Here is my Amazon S3 bucket. This is the bucket that I've configured s2Member to work with. And there is that video.mp4 file that I uploaded to that bucket. You'll need to upload a video file before you can test this code sample. Now this crossdomain.xml file, you can learn more about crossdomain.xml by searching for that in Google. That is created automatically by s2Member whenever you integrate Cloudfront. Okay, so now that we've decided which video that we're going to play, let's take one quick look before we preview this page at these three type and provider entries into the JavaScript player, the player API for JW Player. You can see here at the beginning that the first method that we want to use, we're going to first try the real-time streaming through the Flash player provided by JW Player. This is the most secure option because this is what's going to use the Rtmp protocol. Okay, and you just pop in the streamer tag here that's provided by s2Member. You'll find this API function documented in the s2Member codex. There's further documentation on this also in your dashboard in the file download section. You'll find that under the subsection of the Shortcode Attributes and API Functions. So if you'd like to learn more about how all of this works, you can certainly do that. Okay, so this is the actual Rtmp stream that we're going to try first. Now, if for whatever reason Flash is not available on the device that's attempting to view this video, then we will automatically attempt to fall back on an HTML5 video tag, where we will make an attempt to play the MP4 file directly. And if that doesn't work either, then we'll fall back in the end to a straight download of the MP4 file. Now, it's important to note here that while this code sample provides these fallbacks built in, if you're really concerned about security, you may not want these two additional options in here, because these do provide access to that direct MP4 URL. Okay, now always these are going to be secured and only available to paying users and customers, but even if a paying user or a paying customer, I should say, were to gain access to an MP4 URL, they could then download it and redistribute it, whereas that's not possible if it's being streamed over the Rtmp protocol. So just to keep that in mind, and you'll find further documentation on how this works, on how these fallbacks work at the Longtail Video website in the documentation for JW Player. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look here, and let's go ahead and see if this is going to work as it's supposed to. Okay, there's the media player that pops up. Now, I don't have a thumbnail image that's configured for this, but that's something else that you can add. You can read through the documentation at JW Player on how that's handled. Let's go ahead and click the play button. And there's just this short video clip. Okay, and that was served over an Rtmp real-time stream. Okay, thank you for watching. Okay, hi, I just wanted to do a quick addendum to the JW Player and the Rtmp protocol video. A couple of things I realized that I bypassed that I think are important to mention. Hopefully that will help you out. The first one is regarding the raw HTML plugin. I completely bypassed this. I just assumed when you install the raw HTML plugin, it will be available to you, but by default these are going to be unchecked. Okay, so you can't just do what I did in the video, and that is update and go and view the page, because this code is going to get mangled. Once you have the raw HTML plugin, you do need to check all of these off so that all the content filters are disabled. Okay, then update your page, and then you should be able to view it. Okay. Secondly, here in the code, you'll notice that we're using this API function, s2Member file download URL. Okay, this is what's pulling the streamer, okay, and the file that are required for the JW Player configuration. If you've been through any of the JW Player documentation, you've probably seen a similar code sample that's provided from Longtail Video, but here s2Member is integrating some additional functionality that's required for these security-enabled files. So you can kind of compare this against the documentation that's provided from Longtail, and hopefully if you have any questions beyond that, we can help you in the forum by answering those. But I'm going to show you quickly two other places that you can, resources that you can use to research this if you have any problems. And one of them is right here at s2member.com. You can come up here to the support documentation section, come down here to the codex, the s2Member codex, and choose API functions. Okay, and that will bring you to this long list of all of the API functions made available by s2Member. And in this list, you will find that s2Member file download URL function. And this is well documented. Gives you some sample uses of other ways it can be used, not just for Rtmp streaming. That's one use. And then down below here, you will find all of the configuration parameters documented. And a couple of those we were using in the JW Player example are URL to storage source and count against users. So these are things that you'll want to take a look at and just kind of browse through to get, if you're trying to get a better idea about how it all works. Another source for information is over here at longtailvideo.com. If you go to the JW Player menu here and you come down to the Player Setup Wizard, okay, that'll bring you to this page I'm on right now. And over here in these tutorials, you'll find Rtmp Streaming and using Cloudfront. Okay, now while these might differ slightly from the examples that I just provided, you can certainly change and use something slightly different than what I used in the video. Or if nothing else, maybe some of this information in these tutorials provided by Longtail, perhaps it'll help clarify what's actually going on in the code samples that we provide for s2Member. Okay, and again, I apologize for any confusion on this. This is an extremely advanced aspect, probably the most advanced aspect of s2Member. We've really tried to support this for those who would like to integrate real-time streaming media. But again, this takes some know-how. Okay? All right, I appreciate your patience. Thank you very much for watching.